I don't normally make videos like this, but I felt compelled to speak up because something is happening in one of the largest online visual snow communities that is actively hurting people. If you've ever wondered why it feels so hopeless when you search for answers about this condition, or why clinical research and recovery stories seem to just vanish, there is a very specific human reason for that. In this video, I'm going to break down what's actually happening, how people with visual snow typically find information online, share an update on my personal recovery, and discuss why important research and recovery stories are disappearing off the face of the internet, and what happened when I called this out publicly on an online forum recently. I have a lot of evidence that I'm going to share with you so that you can advocate for yourself in future. My goal here isn't to attack anybody. If you have visual snow, it's to explain to you why online communities matter in managing your condition, especially if you're new to this complex disorder and you're looking for information and hope. But first, a bit of context. My name is Aila, and in December of 2018, I had a sudden onset of static and after images in my vision. It was one of the most terrifying things that I've ever experienced in my life. After months of searching for answers in forums filled with doom and gloom, I was officially diagnosed with visual snow syndrome by Dr. Mark Weatherall in April of 2019. Finding out that there wasn't an official cure was really heartbreaking. So I felt like the only thing that I could do to take control of the situation was to address my general well-being. After about a year of significant lifestyle changes, 95% of my symptoms fully recovered. I used to have a blog called overtoaila.com, and I actually shared my entire recovery story there a couple of years ago, mainly because when I was at my lowest, it was those rare success stories that kept me going. They reminded me that it was possible to get better, and that's why I think these conversations really matter. And actually, a lot of people have been asking me how I'm doing several years later, and I'm probably going to do a bit of a Q&A about that. So if you have any questions about my journey, feel free to drop them in the comments below, and once there's enough, I'll collate them and make a video about it. But there's a bigger issue here. When someone first develops visual snow, naturally, the internet is the first place they go. Over the years, quite a few different communities have been the center of discussion around what's going on, especially before the Visual Snow Initiative came about. There are older forums like Tapper Talk, which has been around for a really long time. There are also large Facebook groups where people have been coming together to share their stories and support each other. And a couple of years ago, the Visual Snow Initiative, the only research organization currently representing our community, was founded. And they now have some excellent resources on all things visual snow. But increasingly, a massive hub for conversation has become Reddit. With 30,000 members, the Visual Snow subreddit is basically the front door for the newly diagnosed. But there's a bottleneck. This massive community is managed by a single moderator who actually has a long-standing personal feud with the Visual Snow Initiative. Because of this personal grudge, any mention of the VSI, the research that they fund, or clinical trials around it are often scrubbed from the sub. Moreover, if they don't agree with something, they label it pseudoscience and prevent discussions around it in the sub. The gatekeeping of conversations around research, clinical trials, and sometimes recovery stories relating to the VSI is really concerning. Trying to remove entire areas of discussion can create a very distorted picture of the condition and limits the range of information people are able to see and discuss. Not to mention, it turns into a very negative space. Think about how dangerous that is. Imagine joining a cancer support sub, and the moderator bans any mention of the leading cancer research foundations simply because they don't like how the organization is run. Without realizing, people that are already terrified might end up feeling much worse. So, onto the problem at hand. Recently, I made a post on this sub, sharing some clinical research as well as a personal recovery story. After a few hours, it was removed without any reason. I then made another post questioning why research and recovery stories were perpetually being removed from the sub. The response was overwhelming. In a matter of hours, it had 140 upvotes and about 80 odd comments. Person after person came forward saying, "I thought this was just me," or "my posts were deleted too." And funnily enough, not long after that, another user came forward with a post about a clinical trial recruiting participants. When that post was removed, they made a follow-up post screenshotting it and saying, "Why was my post removed?" which also got a lot of traction. What ended up happening in the following 24 hours is a masterclass in censorship. The entire thread was deleted and wiped. Not just removed, but every comment was deleted, apart from the ones that aligned with the views of the moderator. I was permanently banned from the sub, and a lot of people who also spoke up reached out to me to say that they were also banned. As a result, I went onto a different Visual Snow subreddit and called out these actions, sharing what had happened. Then it got personal. Now, I know this might sound like internet drama on the surface, but instead of engaging with the community's concerns, the moderator silenced everybody who spoke up and then began a campaign of libel against me. They publicly accused me of nuking a Discord server, even though I've never used Discord, and labeled me a historic drama starter, despite the fact that I'd never actually shared my personal identity on this sub before. This is such dangerous behavior in a large online community about health. When someone first develops a condition and they go on a forum, but all they can see is a filtered narrative and the valuable research and recovery stories that can change people's lives are gone because a person in power doesn't agree with them, that's awful. When I shared my own story on my blog years ago and people found it, I received hundreds of comments on the blog post, emails, Instagram DMs, LinkedIn messages, all saying, "Thank you so much for giving me hope. This has given me strength." And here are some screenshots of those if you want to pause the video. So it's worrying if the only information and experiences that remain visible are decided by individuals that might have an inherent negative bias, then that can create a very skewed picture of what living with that condition is like, which is heartbreaking when someone's suffering. But look, I want to be fair here. Moderating is a brutal and thankless job. And I'm genuinely grateful for all the Visual Snow community moderators across every platform for deciding to do this, because I can tell they care. It's hard work, they have lives, they don't get paid, I get that. But there is a line when moderation becomes malpractice. When a health community reaches 30,000 people in size, it can no longer be a one-man show driven by emotional decisions and personal disputes. We need transparency. We need multiple moderators. We need people to be able to discuss clinical trials and personal recovery stories, regardless of whether or not moderators agree with them. Health communities should be able to hold different types of conversations, difficult experiences, skepticism, research updates, recovery stories, the whole range. And of course, there's a need to protect this space from opportunists looking to make a quick buck, but there should be a system for that. If you take anything from this video, let it be this. Moderation decisions can shape the flow of information in health communities online. And if you're someone who's dealing with Visual Snow yourself, then my advice is this. Try not to rely on a single voice or community for information. Look at multiple sources, listen to a wide range of information, lean into medical research being conducted by scientists who are working hard to find a cure, and make up your own mind. If you're in that particular subreddit, explore other spaces. Don't let one person's personal bias dictate your mental health or your belief in recovery. Visual Snow is hard enough to deal with without perpetual censorship. We really don't need to be fighting each other on what is and isn't allowed to be discussed. We need to be sharing science, hope, positive stories, and we need to be looking out for each other. And a final note from me. Improvement is possible, and I'm an example of that, whether I'm allowed to post it on Reddit or not. Thank you for watching. I really hope that this was helpful, and feel free to check out the resources in my description, where I've also linked the reinstated blog post about my recovery. But most importantly, stay positive and take care.